Here is something that has been quietly sitting in your kitchen for years, and may be doing more for your brain, your heart, and your cells than most people realize. But before I tell you what it is, I want you to think about something that genuinely puzzles researchers. Why do people in certain Mediterranean communities routinely live past 90, sharp, mobile, and largely free of the chronic diseases that devastate most of the Western world, while eating diets centered on fat? Not low fat, not protein shakes, fat, rich golden ancient fat pressed from an olive. Most of us were taught to fear dietary fat, to count calories, to reach for the bottle labeled light or reduced. And yet the epidemiological science, accumulated over decades, tells a more nuanced story. One that most conventional health messaging has been slow to communicate honestly. I'm Dr. Ava Collins. Over the course of my medical career, I have watched the research on extra virgin olive oil accumulate into something that is genuinely compelling, but also something that demands precision. Because the benefits are real, and so are the limits. Both matter. Tonight, I am going to walk you through the specific, research-backed mechanisms that explain why 1 tablespoon of high-quality extra virgin olive oil, taken consistently as part of your evening routine, represents one of the most evidence-supported dietary habits available to adults over 60. I will show you how to choose the real thing, because the adulterated version is far more common than you think, and I will give you the exact timing, dosage, and context that the evidence actually supports. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the most remarkable finding in this video, the one involving your brain that most people still do not fully appreciate, comes in the second half. It is worth the wait. Welcome to the Eternal Vigor Way. Most people think of sleep as rest, but from a cellular standpoint, sleep is one of the body's most metabolically active states, just active in a different direction than waking life. Here is something important to understand correctly. The body's cellular repair processes are not confined to a specific clock hour. They are tied to sleep stage, not time of night. The most intensive tissue repair, muscle recovery, immune consolidation, protein synthesis, and neurological maintenance occurs predominantly during deep slow-wave sleep and REM sleep, which cycle throughout the night regardless of when you go to bed. What this means practically is that what you consume in the hour or two before sleep influences the biochemical environment available during those repair cycles, whenever they occur. Extra virgin olive oil taken before bed is not racing a clock. It is preparing the body's chemistry for the work that sleep itself will trigger. This is precisely why the habit matters. Extra virgin olive oil is not merely a cooking fat. It is a concentrated delivery vehicle for bioactive compounds, oleocanthal, hydroxytyrosol, oleuropein, squalene, and a broad spectrum of polyphenols that support multiple systems simultaneously. Let me take you through what those compounds actually do, starting with the organ most adults over 60 are quietly worried about. Heart disease remains the leading cause of death among adults over 60 worldwide, and the conversation about it is often oversimplified. Arterial disease, atherosclerosis, is not caused by a single factor. It is the product of several converging processes: elevated and oxidized LDL cholesterol, chronic high blood pressure, persistently elevated blood sugar, smoking, and systemic inflammation all contribute. This matters because no single food can address all of them, and it would be misleading to suggest otherwise. What extra virgin olive oil does address specifically and meaningfully is the oxidative and inflammatory dimension of this process. Its primary fatty acid, oleic acid, is a monounsaturated fat that integrates into LDL particles and makes them significantly more resistant to oxidative damage, and it is oxidized LDL, not LDL itself, that triggers the inflammatory cascade leading to plaque formation. In parallel, the polyphenol hydroxytyrosol, present in meaningful concentrations only in cold-pressed extra virgin oil, suppresses NF-κB, the master transcription factor that drives vascular inflammation. A 2022 meta-analysis published in Frontiers in Nutrition found that every 5-gram increase in daily olive oil consumption correlated with a 4% reduction in cardiovascular events and all-cause mortality, plateauing at approximately 20 grams per day. 1 tablespoon, 15 milliliters, falls within that evidence-supported range. This is a meaningful contribution to cardiovascular health. It is not a substitute for managing blood pressure, blood sugar, or smoking if those are relevant to you. But as part of a broader cardiovascular supportive lifestyle, the data is genuinely compelling. The cardiovascular story is only the beginning, and what's coming in just a few minutes, the data on what olive oil does to the aging brain, is the finding I find most remarkable of all. Keep watching. As the digestive system slows with age, constipation, bloating, and disrupted gut flora become increasingly common and increasingly consequential. The gut microbiome, we now understand, is not simply involved in digestion. It communicates directly with the immune system, the brain via the vagus nerve, and the liver through the portal circulation. Extra virgin olive oil influences the gut in 2 distinct ways. First, its monounsaturated fats act as a mild, natural lubricant for the intestinal lining, facilitating peristalsis, the rhythmic muscular contractions that move matter through the colon. For older adults experiencing delayed gastric emptying, this is a clinically relevant effect. Second, and more importantly, the polyphenols in extra virgin olive oil are selectively prebiotic. A 2021 review published in Nutrients found that olive oil polyphenols promote the growth of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species, the beneficial bacteria most associated with reduced systemic inflammation, improved mood regulation, and lower rates of metabolic dysfunction. Taken before bed on a light stomach, these polyphenols are not competing with a heavy meal for absorption. They move efficiently through the upper gastrointestinal tract and arrive in the colon where they nourish the microbial populations your immune system depends on. Here is something that surprises many people. Extra virgin olive oil has measurable, well-documented effects on insulin sensitivity, and those effects are relevant around the clock, including overnight. I want to be precise about the metabolism here because a common misconception is that the body runs exclusively on fat while you sleep. In reality, the body uses a mixture of glucose and fatty acids for fuel at all times, with the ratio shifting depending on metabolic state, activity level, and dietary history. During the overnight fasting window, a metabolically healthy body does shift toward greater fat utilization, but glucose remains part of the picture, particularly for the brain. What matters for adults with early insulin resistance, which affects a significant proportion of people over 60, is that olive oil's primary fatty acid, oleic acid, improves insulin receptor sensitivity in skeletal muscle and adipose tissue by modulating the activity of PPARG, the peroxisome proliferator activated receptor that governs cellular response to insulin. More sensitive receptors mean the pancreas requires less insulin to achieve the same glucose clearance. Additionally, elenolic acid, a compound found naturally in olives, demonstrated in a 2024 study published by the American Society for Nutrition a capacity to reduce fasting blood glucose and support weight management in metabolically compromised subjects. Human trials are ongoing, and these findings should be understood as early-stage evidence rather than established clinical guidance. But the mechanistic case is building. We are about to get into something important: what olive oil does to support liver health, and how its anti-inflammatory compounds work during the repair cycles that sleep enables. And after that, I have a piece of bone health data that surprised even me when I first read it. That is coming up in a moment. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease now affects an estimated 30% of adults worldwide, and the majority are unaware of it. The liver accumulates fat silently, without symptoms, while quietly losing its capacity to filter blood, metabolize hormones, and regulate the hundreds of biological processes it governs. I want to address something directly here, because it is sometimes overstated. The liver does not have a designated detox hour. Hepatic clearance, the filtering of metabolic waste, hormones, and environmental compounds, is a continuous process that runs 24 hours a day. What changes during sleep is not when the liver works, but the nature of the metabolic load it handles. With the digestive burden largely absent, the liver can allocate more capacity to cellular maintenance. What extra virgin olive oil contributes to this process is meaningful. Hydroxytyrosol, its most studied polyphenol, reduces lipid peroxidation in hepatic cells, protecting liver cells from the oxidative damage that drives fat accumulation and inflammatory scarring. Oleic acid reduces de novo lipogenesis, the liver's tendency to synthesize fat from excess carbohydrates, by downregulating SREBP1C, the transcription factor that governs hepatic fat production. A 2019 study in the Journal of Nutrition found that adherence to a Mediterranean diet rich in extra virgin olive oil was associated with a significant reduction in hepatic steatosis, fatty liver, among older adults at high cardiovascular risk, independent of caloric intake. Osteoporosis is often discussed as a calcium deficiency problem, but the research increasingly points to systemic inflammation and oxidative stress as major accelerating factors in bone loss. And this is where olive oil enters the picture with genuinely interesting data. I need to be honest with you here, because honesty is the foundation of everything we do on this channel. When it comes to treating or preventing osteoporosis, pharmacological agents, bisphosphonates, and related medications have demonstrated substantially stronger efficacy in clinical trials than any dietary intervention, including olive oil. If you or someone you care for has a diagnosis of osteoporosis, that conversation belongs with your physician. What olive oil offers is a meaningful supportive role, not a replacement for medical treatment, but a legitimate contribution to the inflammatory environment in which bone remodeling occurs. Bone is living tissue, continuously broken down by osteoclasts and rebuilt by osteoblasts. Elevated inflammatory cytokines, particularly IL-6 and TNF-alpha, tip that balance toward resorption. Olive oil's polyphenols, specifically oleuropein, have been shown to stimulate osteoblast differentiation and inhibit osteoclast activity through modulation of the RANKL signaling pathway. A study published in Clinical Nutrition in 2018 found that high olive oil consumption was associated with a 51% reduction in the risk of osteoporosis-related fractures in an observational cohort. That is a striking association, and it reflects the value of a sustained anti-inflammatory dietary pattern of which olive oil is a meaningful component. I want to pause here for a moment. If what I have shared so far feels different from the health content you normally encounter, more precise, more honest about what works and what does not, that is intentional. On this channel, I do not exaggerate benefits to make them sound more impressive. I do not hide limitations because they complicate the story. I believe that adults who are serious about their long-term health deserve the real picture, mechanisms, evidence, context, and honest caveats, not just the parts that fit a clean narrative. That is what the Eternal Vigor Way is built on. If you want to understand not just what to do, but why it works and where the limits are, then subscribing to this channel is the most valuable health decision you can make today. Every video is held to the same standard, evidence-based, mechanistically grounded, and honest enough to tell you when the science is still developing. Subscribe now, your future self is watching. The immune system undergoes a process called immunosenescence with age, a progressive decline in both the speed and precision of immune response. T cells, the sentinels responsible for identifying and destroying pathogens and abnormal cells, become slower to proliferate and less targeted in their activity. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Nutrition examined the immunological effects of olive oil, specifically in adults aged 65 and older, over a 3-month period. Participants who incorporated olive oil into their daily diet showed significantly enhanced T-cell proliferation compared to controls, a direct measure of immune responsiveness. The mechanism involves oleic acid's role in maintaining the fluidity of cell membranes, including those of immune cells. Membrane fluidity governs how effectively surface receptors signal across the cell wall. When membranes become rigid, as they tend to with age and chronic inflammation, receptor signaling slows and immune response degrades. Oleic acid keeps those membranes fluid and functionally responsive. During the immune surveillance processes that occur throughout sleep, clearing senescent cells, patrolling for early malignant changes, resolving residual inflammation, having adequate oleic acid circulating supports the efficiency of that work. This is an area where I want to offer a corrective to claims you may have seen circulating online. Olive oil does contain melatonin. That is factually correct. However, the concentrations are quite small. We are talking about microgram level quantities, which are far below the milligram doses used in clinical studies of melatonin supplementation. Taking olive oil before bed will not deliver a pharmacologically meaningful melatonin dose. It is important to say that clearly. What olive oil does contribute to sleep quality operates through a different pathway, and it may be more durable than direct melatonin delivery. Chronic inflammation is one of the most underappreciated disruptors of sleep architecture in older adults. Elevated inflammatory cytokines, including IL-1V and TNF-alpha, have been shown to fragment sleep, reduce slow-wave sleep duration, and increase nocturnal cortisol. Olive oil's anti-inflammatory polyphenols, particularly oleocanthal and hydroxytyrosol, address this inflammatory backdrop. Additionally, the monounsaturated fat content of olive oil supports the synthesis of serotonin precursors, the neurotransmitters upstream of melatonin in the pineal pathway. Diets consistently rich in quality fats are associated with more stable sleep architecture over time. The sleep benefit from olive oil is real, but it operates through anti-inflammatory and neurochemical support, not through direct melatonin supplementation. That distinction matters if you are setting realistic expectations. In about 90 seconds, I am going to share the most important data in this entire video. It comes from a 28-year study tracking over 92,000 adults, and its findings about dementia risk are something I believe every person over 50 should understand. Do not go anywhere. Age-related macular degeneration is the leading cause of irreversible vision loss among adults over 60. The retina, and specifically the macula, the dense central region responsible for fine detail vision, is among the most metabolically demanding tissues in the human body and one of the most vulnerable to oxidative damage. Hydroxytyrosol and oleocanthal, two of olive oil's most studied polyphenols, have been shown to cross the blood-retinal barrier. Once present in retinal tissue, they scavenge reactive oxygen species and suppress complement pathway activation, one of the key inflammatory mechanisms driving drusen formation and macular thinning. A study published in PLOS One found that regular olive oil consumption was associated with a statistically significant reduction in late-stage age-related macular degeneration among elderly participants, an association that held after controlling for total fruit and vegetable intake, suggesting that olive oil's unique polyphenol profile contributes independently of general dietary quality. For adults who are concerned about preserving their vision, and who among us is not, this represents a genuinely encouraging piece of evidence. Now, this is the finding I promised you. In 2024, researchers published a landmark study in JAMA Network Open. It followed over 92,000 adults across 28 years, one of the longest nutritional follow-up studies ever conducted on this specific question. The researchers examined one relationship: olive oil consumption and dementia-related mortality. The result was, by any measure, extraordinary. Individuals who consumed more than 7 grams of olive oil per day, less than a teaspoon, experienced a 28% lower risk of dying from dementia compared to those who rarely consumed it. That association held regardless of overall diet quality. The olive oil effect was not explained by the Mediterranean diet pattern as a whole. It appeared to be direct, specific, and substantial. Let me walk you through the three converging mechanisms that researchers believe drive this effect. First, amyloid clearance. Oleocanthal has been shown to enhance the activity of two enzymes, neprilysin and insulin-degrading enzyme, that are responsible for clearing amyloid beta from brain tissue. Amyloid beta accumulation is one of the central pathological features of Alzheimer's disease. Oleocanthal does not merely slow its production. The research suggests it accelerates its clearance. Second, mitochondrial protection in neurons. Hydroxytyrosol protects neurons from the mitochondrial dysfunction that precedes synaptic failure. Neurons are among the most energetically demanding cells in the body. When their mitochondria degrade, cognitive function follows measurably. Hydroxytyrosol preserves mitochondrial membrane integrity and upregulates endogenous antioxidant production via the NRF2 pathway. Third, microglial modulation. In the aging brain, microglia, the brain's resident immune cells, can shift from their protective homeostatic state to a chronically activated, destructive one. This microglial overactivation releases inflammatory cytokines that damage synaptic connections. Oleocanthal's anti-inflammatory action, which operates through the same enzymatic pathway as ibuprofen, helps maintain microglia in their protective state. 28% lower risk of dementia-related death from a single dietary component, tracked over nearly 3 decades. This is not preliminary data. This is published in one of the most respected medical journals in the world, and its clinical implications are still being absorbed by the broader medical community. The skin undergoes its most intensive repair during deep sleep. Fibroblast activity peaks during slow-wave sleep stages when growth hormone secretion is highest. The results demonstrated that hydroxytyrosol, tyrosol, and oleocanthal significantly increased fibroblast proliferation and migration, both essential processes for skin regeneration. By taking olive oil before sleep, you are ensuring that these fibroblast-supporting compounds are bioavailable during the sleep stages when the skin's repair machinery is most active. The monounsaturated fatty acids in olive oil also reinforce the skin's lipid barrier from within, reducing transepidermal water loss and supporting the hydration gradient that keeps skin supple rather than fragile with age. The results demonstrated that hydroxytyrosol, tyrosol, and oleocanthal significantly increased fibroblast proliferation and migration, both essential processes for skin regeneration. By taking olive oil before sleep, you are ensuring that these fibroblast-supporting compounds are bioavailable during the sleep stages when the skin's repair machinery is most active. The monounsaturated fatty acids in olive oil also reinforce the skin's lipid barrier from within, reducing transepidermal water loss and supporting the hydration gradient that keeps skin supple rather than fragile with age. This is an area where I want to be especially careful with language because the distinction between laboratory findings and clinical evidence matters enormously. Oleocanthal has been observed in laboratory studies, specifically in cell culture experiments, to selectively disrupt the lysosomal membranes of cancer cells, triggering cell death through a process called lysosomal membrane permeabilization. These findings are scientifically interesting and warrant continued investigation. However, I want to be unambiguous. These are in vitro findings, meaning they were observed in isolated cells in a laboratory setting, not in human subjects. Oleocanthal is not an approved cancer treatment, and these results do not establish that consuming olive oil treats or cures cancer in people. Moving from a cell culture finding to a human therapy involves an enormously complex and uncertain path. What the population-level data does show is a different kind of signal. A comprehensive 2022 meta-analysis published in PLOS One found that individuals with the highest olive oil consumption had a 31% lower likelihood of developing any type of cancer compared to those with the lowest intake. This is an observational association, not proof of causation, and it likely reflects olive oil's role as a marker of a broader anti-inflammatory dietary pattern. As one component of a lifestyle that reduces chronic inflammation, Extra virgin olive oil contributes to a biochemical environment that is less hospitable to malignant cell proliferation. That is a meaningful, honest statement, and it is enough. A study published in Clinical Nutrition in 2021 examined the relationship between olive oil consumption and stroke risk in a large prospective cohort. Individuals consuming between 20 and 30 grams of olive oil per day experienced the maximum protective effect, with a statistically significant reduction in ischemic stroke incidence. The mechanisms here converge elegantly with what we have already discussed. Improved LDL oxidation resistance reduces atherosclerotic burden, anti-inflammatory effects lower the risk of plaque destabilization, enhanced endothelial function, supported by nitric oxide pathways that oleic acid facilitates, improves cerebrovascular blood flow, and the mild antithrombotic properties of olive oil polyphenols reduce platelet aggregation tendency. 1 tablespoon per night, consumed consistently, places you well within the evidence-supported daily range for these protective effects. Before I close, I am going to give you something immediately practical. Exactly how to identify authentic extra virgin olive oil, how to recognize the fraudulent products that flood supermarket shelves, and the precise protocol, dose, timing, and realistic expectations that the research supports. This part matters more than most people realize, because taking the wrong olive oil may deliver none of these benefits at all. The olive oil industry is one of the most adulterated sectors in the global food supply. Studies conducted by food science laboratories in the United States and Europe have found that a significant percentage of bottles labeled extra virgin contain refined oils, blended cheaper oils, or olive oil that has been deodorized with heat, destroying the very bioactive compounds that make it clinically relevant. Here is what to look for. Labeling. The bottle must say 100% extra virgin. Pure olive oil, light olive oil, and olive oil are refined products stripped of polyphenols. They are fine for cooking at high heat, but not for therapeutic purposes. Harvest date. Look for a harvest date, not just an expiration date. Polyphenol content in olive oil degrades over time. Oils older than 18 months from harvest have lost a substantial portion of their bioactive potency. If there is no harvest date, treat that as a meaningful omission. Packaging. Dark glass is essential. Light exposure degrades polyphenols rapidly. Avoid clear glass or plastic containers for therapeutic use. Production method. Look for the words cold-pressed or first cold-pressed. This confirms that no heat above 27 degrees Celsius was applied during extraction, preserving oleocanthal, hydroxytyrosol, and the full polyphenol spectrum. Origin. Single origin or estate-sourced oils are more reliably authentic than multi-country blends. Countries with strong regulatory certification frameworks, Greece, Italy, Spain, and Tunisia, produce oils that are more consistently verified. Taste. Authentic high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil has a distinct bitterness and a peppery sting at the back of the throat. That sensation is oleocanthal, the anti-inflammatory compound signaling its presence. If your olive oil tastes smooth, mild, and neutral, it almost certainly lacks therapeutic polyphenol concentrations. Based on the convergence of evidence across the research I have reviewed, here is the protocol that is most consistent with what the science supports. Dose. 1 tablespoon, approximately 15 milliliters, of high-quality extra virgin olive oil per evening. This amount delivers meaningful concentrations of oleocanthal, hydroxytyrosol, and oleic acid without placing excessive digestive burden before sleep. Timing: 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Taking it before the body enters sleep allows the bioactive compounds to be absorbed and circulating during the repair cycles that deep sleep stages trigger. Take it on an empty stomach or after a light dinner. Avoid pairing it with a large, protein-heavy meal. Competition for bile acids and absorption pathways can reduce polyphenol bioavailability. Temperature. Never heat the oil you intend to take therapeutically. Heat degrades oleocanthal rapidly. Take it at room temperature. plain, on a small piece of bread, or over lightly cooked vegetables if the taste is initially challenging. Duration and realistic expectations. Subjective improvements in digestive comfort and reduced joint stiffness are commonly reported within 2 to 4 weeks. Metabolic markers such as fasting glucose and LDL oxidation tend to shift within 60 to 90 days of consistent use. The cognitive and cardiovascular benefits documented in long-term studies accumulated over years of habitual consumption. This is not an acute intervention, it is a foundational daily habit whose value compounds over time. And one final note on expectations. Olive oil works best as part of a broader, health-supportive pattern. Adequate sleep, physical activity, a diet rich in vegetables and quality protein, and where needed, appropriate medical management of conditions like hypertension or diabetes. It amplifies a healthy foundation. It does not replace one. The Mediterranean populations who have practiced this for generations understood this intuitively. The science is now confirming what they knew. Before I close, I want to say something directly. What I have tried to do in this video is something you will not find on most health channels. Give you the honest version. The version that tells you oleocanthal's cancer effects are in laboratory cells, not clinical trials. That arterial disease is multifactorial, not solved by a single oil. That the liver does not have a dedicated detox hour. That olive oil contains very little melatonin. That medications outperform diet for established osteoporosis. I said all of that, and the benefits are still remarkable. That is what real science looks like. Honest about limitations, and still genuinely impressive. If that is the standard you want from your health information, come back. Subscribe to the Eternal Vigor Way. Hit the notification bell, because the next video in this series addresses something that is quietly accelerating aging in millions of adults over 60, and almost no one is talking about the mechanism clearly. You will not want to miss it. Let me bring this together with precision. 1 tablespoon of authentic cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil, taken consistently before bed, provides the body with a concentrated dose of oleocanthal, hydroxytyrosol, oleuropein, oleic acid, and squalene. These compounds support the body across multiple systems in ways that are genuinely well evidenced. It reduces the oxidative vulnerability of LDL cholesterol, contributing to cardiovascular protection as one part of a multifactorial equation. It feeds beneficial gut bacteria. It improves insulin receptor sensitivity, supporting metabolic function through the overnight fasting window, during which the body uses both fat and glucose, not fat alone. It supports liver cell integrity throughout the body's continuous hepatic clearance processes. It contributes to the anti-inflammatory environment in which bone remodeling occurs. As a supportive companion to, not a replacement for, medical care where that is needed. It maintains immune cell membrane fluidity. It reduces the inflammatory backdrop that disrupts sleep architecture, though not through direct melatonin delivery, which is present only in trace amounts. It protects retinal tissue from oxidative damage, and it delivers through 3 distinct neurological pathways the compounds associated in a 28-year, 92,000-person study with a 28% reduction in dementia-related mortality. Its oleocanthal has shown anti-cancer activity in laboratory cell experiments, preliminary, not yet clinical, but biologically compelling. And its anti-inflammatory, endothelial-supporting properties contribute to meaningfully reduce stroke risk at the doses the research supports. The oil must be authentic, cold-pressed, recently harvested, in dark glass. The dose is 1 tablespoon. The time is before bed. The commitment is consistent and long-term, and the science, when told honestly, is still remarkable. That is the Eternal Vigor Way. I'm Dr. Ava Collins. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.